an excellent panel. We got a Deputy Foreign Minister of Myanmar. I had the pleasure of listening to him in Yunnan twice in two of the international conferences. Then we have Dr. Udai Bhanu Singh, who has been associated so much with Myanmar that he should have get a de facto citizenship of Myanmar by now. Then we have Mr. Rajeev Bhattacharyya, who truly shows the true colors of all what is really going on. So we are thankful to him. No more sugar coating. And then we have Dr. Pushpita Das, my old colleague, old friend. And let me tell you, she is one of the foremost scholars who have worked on border management. So much so that the BASF instituted a border management institute. So that shows how much impressive she has been. Okay, welcome to this session. And this session is more tricky and a little bit more nuanced in terms of we are discussing the bilateral relations between the two countries. As my predecessor has really charted out, Mr. Maung, former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, will be the first speaker for the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me begin on a personal note. I served in our foreign ministry for altogether 37 years. And one of the things that I'm really proud of, and which I took as one of my great achievement, was that I was the chief negotiator from the Myanmar side for the Kalay-Tammu Road. And I was so happy that we were able to conclude and later construct this road, which is so essential for the development of that particular area, which is, even by Myanmar standard, was not very developed. So I take this opportunity just to relate in a way, my connection with India. During the previous session, there was one question: how India is viewed from Myanmar. And in my presentation, I think this is going to be the main focus. Yesterday, while looking at my Facebook, I came across this picture. This is General Aung San and, of course, Mr. Nehru. And this was taken when General Aung San, I attach great importance to this photo and to this event, because General Aung San, on his way to London in January 1947 to discuss about the eventual independence for Myanmar. So what he did was, on the way, he made a stopover in New Delhi, to be exact, on the 2nd January 1947. And in many ways, Nehru, because General Aung San, for him, this was also his very first major diplomatic engagement. And he was going to talk and discuss with the British for the eventual independence. And as far as I understand, Nehru gave many, many good advice regarding the forthcoming discussions. Eventually, because after, and of course, there's one other footnote, is that you will see that Aung San is still wearing a military uniform, and Nehru said, "You cannot go to London in those clothes. You will die from cold exposure." And but there was no overcoat, because General Aung San is not very big, and there was no overcoat immediately available for him. So he was given 2 army greatcoats that was only available for him. And he wore that great military coat given by Nehru to the conference in London. It's just, I want to add a little footnote and to show how intertwined our 2 countries in our struggle for independence. Because following this visit, we have the Aung San Attlee Agreement, which is the basis for our independence. Actually, I have divided my talk into 3 parts, but the first part I will go very quickly. Of course, since I'm going to talk about Myanmar-India relations only, and let me also further narrow my discussion, because in the interest of time, I'm going to deal mostly devoted to political aspect, diplomatic aspect of our relations, and not so much the economic and social aspect, because I don't think I will have enough time to touch all of them. So if we look at Myanmar-Indian relations, of course we have long historical, cultural, and ethnic and religious ties. In fact, the Indian Foreign Ministry, according to their publication, they said, India-Myanmar relations are rooted in shared historical, ethnic, cultural, and religious ties. This is what is written in the Indian Ministry of External Affairs booklet about the relations with Myanmar. So we have a long relationship, which, as I just mentioned when I was talking about the photograph, how we have strengthened our ties during our struggle for independence. And at the third point, I mentioned that successive governments have worked for consolidation of friendship and cooperation. And for that, I have only I just want to highlight only one point. Starting from the photo I've shown, General Aung San. Every Myanmar leader, after General Aung San, we have U, then we have General Ne Win. Every Myanmar leader, since General Aung San and U, up to the President Udai, had paid official or state visits to Myanmar, to India. This I say that the importance, to underline the importance that Myanmar attaches to its relations with India. Because leaders don't go visiting other countries without reason. I've also, with me here, 2 paragraphs regarding foreign policy in our present constitution. And of course, the first article said practices independent, active, and non-aligned foreign policy aimed at world peace and friendly relations with nations and upholds the principle. One thing I would like to emphasize is the last line, upholds the principles of peaceful coexistence among nations. When we say peaceful coexistence among nations, we are talking about the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence which is one of the pillars of our foreign policy. And it was laid down together with China by India and Myanmar. It was signed by Chinese, the then Premier Chu Enlai, by Mr. Nehru, and by UNU. And these principles remain the basic pillar of our foreign policy. And these 5 principles were later incorporated into the 10 Bandung. These were laid down in 1954. In 1955, when we have the Afro-Asian meeting in Bandung, they were incorporated into the 10 principles, which later became the foundation for a non-aligned movement. Both Myanmar and India played a great role. And of course, there was one thing that we must also emphasize, because this second paragraph was especially put in, especially because we are very conscious of the second point. And that is, no foreign troops will be permitted to be deployed in the territory of the Union. This is a principle we have applied throughout all these years. And continuing about the various pillars of our foreign policy, of course we want friendly relations with all nations. Every country normally wants friendly relations. But in our case, we made a special mention that we want especially good relations with our neighbors, because we believe that for the peace and stability, as well as for the economic development and progress, the neighboring countries has a special role to play. We are more committed to play a more active role in the regional and international affairs, as can be seen by the fact that, in 2014, we were, I think this is the first time that such a thing has happened. We played host to both BIMSTEC and ASEAN as chairman. And indeed, we became a member of ASEAN in 1997. At the same time, in the same year, although we were not a full member, we became associated with BIMSTEC in the same year in 1997. We look at the world today, and we find that regional economic cooperation has assumed greater importance. There are many, many initiatives going on. And we in Myanmar feel that we should be confident enough to participate in these regional economic cooperation endeavors. And of course, there are two, including the South Mekong region and GMS and all that. So we are trying to play a role. But at the same time, of course, in all foreign policies around the world, there is both continuity and change. Continuity in the sense that you keep the basic principles, but you also adapt to the changing. In implementing them, you also adapt to the changing conditions and circumstances. This is just by way of introduction because my main theme will be our relations with India. Now, as to how we look at India. Well, as I said in the beginning, we shared many historical things as well. And of course, one fact that sometimes get lost is that, you know, when the British conquered Myanmar, they took our king to India, even as they took Savasha to Myanmar, and Savasha died in Myanmar, and King Thimpho died in India. And India, as I said, we have this very long tradition, and at the same time, India was one of the first countries in which we established our diplomatic relations. And I must say, let me diverge a little bit. The British, when the General Aung San signed this Aung San Attlee agreement, the British were, I give them full credit, said, if you are going to be independent, you must have a foreign service, you must be able to open embassies. And in our case, we decided on 6 nations where we want our first embassies. And one of them is India. Of course, you know, the vast majority of our people are Buddhists. And for us, India is always the land of Buddha, the land of Buddhism, the birthplace of Buddhism. India, in our eyes, is a trusted friend. We never, let me stress, we has never considered India as a national security threat. We have never felt threatened by India. We may not see eye to eye because every nation has its own priorities, has its own policies. We may not always see eye to eye in everything. But one thing that is sure from our point of view is that we never consider India as a security threat, although India is much more powerful than us. We welcome the fact, indeed, we welcome the fact that India's stature in the world, India's economic power in the world is growing because you are a friend of our country. And let me also add that in this regard, we fully endorse your efforts to become a member of the UN Security Council. I'm sorry because I have very weak eyes, and because of the light, I have some problem with my eyes. At the same time, I'm not going to go into details because there are much more. There are people who are familiar with the economic and side and with the assistance program from India to Myanmar. But what I would like to say is that we do look forward to greater ties, economic ties, trade ties, investment ties with India. I'm not going to talk in numbers, but I want to talk in terms of policy. And that we look to India as our partner for progress. Yes, we share a common border of over 1,000 kilometers, or some say 1,600 kilometers of common border. But let me add one thing about when you say about common borders. I used to say that border demarcations and border lines exist on map. Between India and Myanmar, there is not even a line drawn by white paint saying that this is India or this is Myanmar. And people from both sides, the villagers from both sides, they don't really care whether they are in India or in Myanmar. Because when there is a market day, as you know, in some of these small places, there's no market for every day. Sometimes it's held 5 days a day, or every 5 days, or every 7 days, or every 3 days. People just cross over. And let me add, about 10 years ago, I had a chance to travel actually with our Vice Commander-in-Chief to Shillong. And on the way back, we visited all the major towns in the Khin state. In the India-Myanmar border, including the Reed area, because we also visited the Reed Lake, which is so important for the people around the area. And what we find is that, I don't know about today, because this has happened about 10 years ago, the infrastructure, the road infrastructure is very weak. And we have to go by. The only way that we can visit all these 10 places, all these places, is by helicopter. Because I say this because I want to let you know the situation on our side. And the thing is that in the border areas, you can go on for miles and miles without coming across a single village. This is the fact of life in our border areas. But at the same time, for us, from our Myanmar perspective, of course, let's forget Laos, because Laos and we have 5 neighbors, forget Laos, among the other 4. You are the only country that we have no big security issues, border security issues. Of course, we know that what happened recently at the border, but from our perspective, this is much more, small compared to the problems we have at the 3 other areas. And another thing is that this is a fact of life. There are villages, there are places which are, I will tell you very frankly, because of the lack of infrastructure, because of the terrain, and because of other factors, where the writ of the government is very minimal. This is, I will tell you very frankly, this is the true situation in some of our border areas with India. Yes? And so, with this, I would like to go to my last portion. Because this was, I think this is also important for the future of our relations. We are having elections, general elections, in 2015, November 8th. As I mentioned before, transitions are never easy. In these 4 years of transition, we faced many difficult tasks, challenges. Our path has not always been in a straight line. We have to sometimes take a zigzag, sometimes even make a bend backwards to go forward. But this is, I think, is quite natural. And one thing, of course, I'm not, fortune teller, so I cannot say who will win the election or who will come out the winners in the election. But what I can say, and when I say what I can say, is what most observers believe is that Myanmar will enter a new political stage after the election. Because according to the schedule, the elections will be on the 8th November, and a new government will be sworn in around about the end of March 2016. So, as I said, I'm no fortune teller, and because our political situation is quite complicated, and there are many factors involved, because if I want to talk about it, it will be another session, so I will just stop at that. But one thing I can assure you, that our basic, whatever government comes in, our basic foreign policy orientation will not change. Of that, I'm sure. Yes, there may be some nuances. Of course, the government, the present government, or whoever comes in might have its own priorities. There may be some nuances, but the basic orientation will not change. And for me, whatever the government takes over in March 2016, the government will surely like to pursue a policy of friendship and cooperation with India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the NIAS authorities for having called me to NIAS, and it's my first visit here. It's such a pleasure to be here attending this conference, which has seen so much of discussion, and primarily because of Dr. Mail, and unfortunately he is not well, and I do hope that Dr. Mail gets well soon. We've had very enriching discussion, and particularly I was delighted to hear the previous speaker present his opinions on India-Myanmar relations. Myanmar, I think, is an underrated neighbor with potential to influence India's vital strategic and economic interests. I think India and Myanmar have many issues and concerns, and as far as our India-Myanmar policy is concerned, we have many objectives in mind. We have also certain means of achieving those objectives. How far we have been successful needs to be analyzed. But at the moment, India-Myanmar relations have converged on a certain issues. The most recent was, of course, on the border. And to be successful, you know, in terms of our Myanmar policy, the Modi government will need to look both within and without. That means to the internal policy of and also the external policy. It will have to factor in and take into account primarily the northeastern region in its Act East policy, which it has framed. Previous governments have attempted to prioritize the Myanmar policy with varying results. From outright differences to joint military operations, India-Myanmar relations have traversed the entire spectrum. They have seen many ups and downs. But the India-Myanmar relations have always been very cordial because they are rooted, as the minister very rightly said, in our deep cultural and historical links. Myanmar's transition to democracy has added a new dimension to India's relations with its closest ASEAN neighbor. Myanmar's new experiment with democracy is little over 4 years old, having installed a civilian government in 2011. The 2008 constitution is currently in place and the country will go to polls in November 2015. Myanmar's transition has been marked by a series of developments, and they have been at the national level, at the regional level, and also globally. India is watching Myanmar with keen interest because it is our next door neighbor and borders 4 of our northeastern states. It is the only Southeast Asian country with which we have a land border. Its geostrategic importance has often been emphasized. As far as our Look East policy is concerned, we introduced it in the early 1990s, and now the Look East policy is progressing through various phases. It could justifiably claim some credit for the change of heart of Western nations in abandoning their policy of boycott and sanctions against Myanmar. Just as the Look East policy is said to have progressed to Look East policy phase 3, time has now come for India's Myanmar policy to move to India-Myanmar policy phase 3, parallel to the Look East policy, which has now entered the Act East policy phase. In India-Myanmar policy phase 1, India's support in 1988 and after to the democratic movement, a big wedge was created between Yangon and Delhi. In the phase 2 of India's Myanmar policy, we realized that to engage the regime in power is very important, and therefore we began to engage the regime in power. This now is the phase when it is the right time for closer interactions, as the phase 3 is the advanced, if not mature phase of the relationship, where it is important to lay down the rules of engagement with Myanmar and follow them in order to ensure that the trust levels are kept up. Because there is a danger that if we are not careful, our best of friends may, we could have some difference of opinion. Some might argue that these efforts are not worth it, that the Myanmar government has not democratized enough, or that its ethnic conflicts remain yet unresolved, or that the constitution has not been amended, or that the Myanmar government did not show sufficient resolve in expelling some insurgent groups. But such arguments underestimate Myanmar's friendly approach towards India and a constant relationship between India and Myanmar. Put simply, what happens in Myanmar will not be limited to Myanmar. From China's maritime quest in the Bay of Bengal, India's energy quest, development needs of India's northeastern region, managing China's regional and global challenge, and Myanmar's own development requirements, we need to manage India and Myanmar relationship to the best of our ability. Achieving India's objectives in Myanmar is therefore very important. There are various means of achieving these objectives. Our objectives are to be achieved through diplomatic means, economic means, cultural and military diplomacy. Through diplomacy, we have seen that at the bilateral level and at the multilateral level, India and Myanmar have been very close. At the bilateral level, right through the phase of transition, we have seen official visits between India and Myanmar. India has been had been a bit of a laggard, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi seized the opportunity to visit Myanmar when the multilateral occasion presented itself recently in the form of East Asia Summit in Naypyidaw, while External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj also visited Myanmar recently. At the 12th ASEAN-India Summit, Prime Minister Modi declared, externally India's Look East policy has become Act East policy. He further indicated that Bangladesh is an integral part of the Act East policy. Earlier, of course, Dr. Manmohan Singh had visited Myanmar in 2012. It was the first visit of Indian Prime Minister after a long period of 25 years. During that visit, Dr. Singh had met the new civilian leadership in the new capital, Naypyidaw, and the NLD leader also in the old capital, Yangon. The Indian Prime Minister's visit almost coincided with Aung San Suu Kyi's visit to Bangkok, which was also after about 24 years. But Aung San Suu Kyi met the former Prime Minister as well. At the multilateral level also, we have had many cooperative endeavors. But before I mention about the multilateral engagements, I would like to mention that during former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit, an agreement, an MOU was signed in which my Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis and Myanmar Institute of Strategic Studies, to which Minister also belongs, we signed an MOU for cooperation. And similarly, the Indian Council of World Affairs, to which Dr. Pankaj Jha belongs, also signed an MOU with Myanmar Institute of Strategic Studies. That shows the level of understanding that actually exists between the two countries at an academic and think tank level. At the multilateral level, India and Myanmar have been cooperating not only in ASEAN forums, but also in BIMSTEC, Mekong Ganga Cooperation Forum, and SAARC, where Myanmar is an observer member. Myanmar, of course, as mentioned earlier, became member of BIMSTEC in 1997. At the same time, it became member of ASEAN. India has, of course, a number of strategic imperatives in Myanmar. India's interest in Myanmar can be explained in terms of that country's enormous strategic importance. We share about 1643 kilometers of long border with Myanmar, and of course a very long maritime boundary as well. India wants Myanmar to ensure that the area west of Chindwin River remains free of Chinese or Pakistani influence. 4 states in India's northeast border, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, are bordering Myanmar. Similarly, 3 Myanmar states border India: Kachin, Sagaing, and Chin. Secondly, it is important to seek stability in the northeastern border by ensuring economic prosperity in those areas which are yet to develop properly. Thirdly, Myanmar's border with Bangladesh to its northwest is also crucial from India's perspective because it provides an alternative route and a crucial one to Myanmar and Southeast Asia. Here it is important to remember that northeast, through which the route to Myanmar traverses, is only tenuously linked by the chicken neck, which we all know about. We need to curb drug trafficking and smuggling. Myanmar shares land border with other major Asian powers, which is China. Myanmar shares border with 2 other Southeast Asian states, Thailand and Laos to its east. Both India and China understand Myanmar's maritime significance. Myanmar's coast on the Bay of Bengal and the southwest in the Andaman Sea is strategically very significant. It is in close proximity to India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The 2 countries also maintain close military-to-military contacts and exchange regular high-level visits. Myanmar has often come into prominence because of our very turbulent border sometimes because of insurgency problems. On May 8th, 2014, India's ambassador to Myanmar, Mr. Mukhopadhyay, and Major General Chor Nyunt, Deputy Defence Minister of Myanmar, signed an important MOU on border cooperation. Its provisions included a framework of security cooperation and exchange of information between India and Myanmar security agencies. There were certain other elements to it, but I won't go through that. Perhaps this MOU was helpful in tackling with the recent problems that we faced on our border. And that is why a constant interaction at the border through the security forces is so very important. It plays a very important role for India in tackling insurgency problems. There's been which have been a source of concern for both countries, and the problem has often been aggravated by the fact that people of the same ethnic community are found across the border. The 2 armies have cooperated closely in the past as well. We know of the Operation Golden Bird, which happened in July 1995, which was a partial success but failed because of certain reasons to come to its logical conclusion. Later, the 2 sides have held discussions in Kalemyo, Myanmar in November 2001, and the Myanmar army arrested some 40 Manipur insurgents when it raided 3 underground camps at Tamu, Namphalong and Khanjao near the Manipur border. These insurgents belong to United Nations People's Liberation Army and People's Revolutionary Party of Kangle Park. The point that I'm trying to make is that in the past also the Myanmar army has cooperated with the Indian army in dealing with some of our insurgent problems in the northeast. There are other imperatives that India has in Myanmar, economic imperatives. India's Look East policy and its policy of liberalization, as we know, almost coincided. Both began at the same time in the early 1990s. The Look East policy was aimed externally, and the liberalization policy was aimed within the country. A stable economy is a necessary precondition for a stable government. Though the Thein Sein government administers a country with considerable natural resources, it is still categorized as an LDC country with a low per capita income. The GDP growth, however, has been increasing in the recent years in Myanmar. And Myanmar has shown very much sustained economic growth in the recent past because of an inflow of large foreign investment. but it is feared that increased imports will lead to increased current account deficit. This is perhaps one of the fears that economists have expressed. Also, although the National League for Democracy has not spelled out its economic policy priorities, were it to come to power after November elections, it would gain from the expected enhanced external engagement and foreign aid which would come in. Myanmar's GDP, according to EIU estimates, is expected to grow at 6.8% in this year. As a consequence, the trade has suffered, and we need to connect the northeast of India to the business centers of Southeast Asia. Here it is very important to remember that the infrastructure in northeast India is as backward as the infrastructure in Sagaing province of Myanmar, because of the colonial policy that were followed by Britain when they ruled both India and Myanmar and Burma. As far as roads are concerned, as the infrastructure, there was a flawed logic employed earlier that safety lies in not building the road or not building roads because it is increasingly a security threat. But that logic was flawed, and steps are being taken to overcome that kind of approach. India has helped Myanmar build roads so that surface transport gives a boost to trade and tourism. Third, it is our only road link to Southeast Asia. India has a long border with Myanmar, which has become ASEAN member. First, it is important to have economic linkages, then trade and commerce will grow. On the one hand, these states are in the grip of law and order problems, and on the other, they have somehow been left out of national mainstream. India's former External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaswant Singh, had inaugurated the Friendship Road, which is 160 kilometers long and starts from Manipur, More Tamu road, which goes up to Kalemyo. The road link to Myanmar is important for at least three reasons: as a link to rest of Southeast Asia, and in order to tackle insurgency, and also for economic reasons. As far as the other linkages, connectivity linkages are concerned, there is the Trans-Asian Railway, which is important and which will be built up, and important to have also air connectivity to Myanmar towns. China has already developed linkages from its towns to major cities of Myanmar, and I think it is important for the two friendly countries to establish linkages, especially because we have a number of Buddhist sites in India where tourists from Myanmar would like to come, and tourists from other parts of Southeast Asia would also like to be there. Trade. We have signed the ASEAN-India Free Trade Agreement, and that would mean slashing of duties on many products from Myanmar. Trade relations are bound to be growing, and what is required is that border trade should also equally grow between India and Myanmar. Ever since the border trade agreement was signed in 1994, we have seen more border posts open up on our northeastern border. We have land custom stations in Arunachal. As far as Nagaland is concerned, it has been agreed to open. Manipur, Mizoram. As far as aid is concerned, for economic recovery, a resumption of aid from multilateral agencies is the key, according to certain agencies, and trade consultancy is required. There is a lot of scope equally for tourism to grow between India and Myanmar. As far as investment is concerned, Myanmar has begun to attract considerable investment after the opening up. Myanmar government has liberalized its foreign investment laws, and the impact of flood of investment into Myanmar had an impact on India too, which slipped from being the 10th largest investor to the 11th largest investor in Myanmar, with an improved investment of $508 million out of total estimated of a much larger investment to Myanmar. India has mainly invested in the oil and gas sector. Policymakers in New Delhi were concerned that the increased Chinese participation in infrastructure projects in Myanmar could have an adverse impact on India's security. Myanmar too expressed misgivings about a Chinese stranglehold over its economy. In fact, Myanmar has distributed development of its important projects among the major powers. India's business needs to be more aggressive in maintaining its presence in Myanmar. Myanmar's British legacy of English language, an effective legal system, and in already existing patent and copyright law are expected to attract foreign investors. On the energy front, also, we need to pursue our linkages in Myanmar. Concerns do persist between India and Myanmar, and these concerns relate to some issues which need urgent attention. Concerns emanating from Myanmar are regarding the insurgent camps which are in Myanmar, where safe havens are. Of course, Myanmar government is attending to most of our Indian concerns regarding that. There are certain pending border demarcation issues as well. Another important pending issue is the Rohingya problem, which does impact us, as the Mahabodhi temple attack showed. The Meitei diaspora in Myanmar is beset by contradictions, which also need to be addressed by India. Problems emanating from China include during that period that India took the approach of not dealing with the military in power. We paid dearly as China filled the vacuum in terms of influence. There was a significant rise in Chinese footprint in Myanmar. Chinese influence in Myanmar and support to Indian insurgent groups is also a concern. And then Chinese access to the Indian Ocean is also raising some security concerns. And of course, threats like insurgency, maritime piracy, cross-border small arms and drugs smuggling, and human trafficking are other concerning issues. Our involvement in Myanmar cannot be a zero-sum game with China. This is something that I would like to reassert. We need to have constructive engagement with Myanmar, and that also includes engaging China as well. Concerns emanating from India's northeast include insurgency and developmental concerns. As far as the way forward is concerned, Myanmar goes to the polls this year in November. Whatever be the election results in Myanmar, the strategic and economic concerns of Delhi and Naypyidaw will converge, as my observations have tried to bring out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Udai Bhanu Singh. On the Rohingya issue, within India there is a clear-cut, difference opinion, because Rohingyas for us might be not that economically, enticing ethnic group, and moreover, Rohingyas we don't really take care as a major economic or social issue for us, because Rohingyas as such have very dark, shady grays area in which there are a number of articles which have been written. So from my personal perspective, I don't believe that Rohingya will be a major issue for us, typically with regard to bilateral relations between India and Burma. May I now ask Mr. Rajeev Bhattacharya from Guwahati to kindly make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I feel honored to be speaking on this occasion, and I thank Nias for giving me this beautiful opportunity, and especially Dr. Mail, Ramya, Suparna, for giving we have been in touch for quite a long time, and I hope Dr. Mail gets well soon. Well, this is quite a vast topic, and summing it up in 20 minutes is really a tough challenge, so I'll go really very fast. Well, if we talk about the challenges on the Indo-Myanmar border, I would like to categorize them into, there are 5 issues, I believe. These are the major challenges on the Indo-Myanmar border. Now, among these 5 issues, my perception is that The biggest challenge for the Indian government is in the integration of the border areas, not insurgency. Insurgency is going to fizzle out from the northeast. If you have a look at the statistics of insurgency related incidents for the last 15 years, you'll find it's going down. Insurgency is a response, is a violent response to some anomaly in the region. So insurgency, in my perception, is fizzling out. Even the rebel bases in Myanmar, which I'll come to that later on, I don't see the possibility of rebel bases in Myanmar, rebels operating out of the bases in Myanmar for a very long time. So the biggest challenge for the Indian government is the integration of the border areas with the mainstream. Unfortunately, I don't see any policy, very concrete and long-term policy of the Indian government. For the last 70 years, we are almost, after 2 years, we will be 70 years of independence, but I don't really see any long-term perspective. It's really very unfortunate. You go to the border areas, you'll know what I'm talking about. So let's now very briefly come one by one to all these issues. This is the map of the Indo-Myanmar border. It starts right from Arunachal, ends at Mizoram, 1643 kilometers. So these are the main issues in the integration of the border areas. As rightly pointed out by Mr. Khin Maung, the two areas on the Indian side and also on the Myanmar side, they are most underdeveloped regions in both the countries. Perhaps the situation in Myanmar, as he rightly said, it's beyond the reach of the Myanmarese government. They're trying. Maybe after 10 years, the situation is going to change. It's very necessary to understand that. Myanmar is not a very rich country. It has opened up now. Maybe after 10, 20 years, it's going to be a rich country. It doesn't have the resources, to my understanding. So there is a big gap between the goals formed up by the Indian government and the ground reality. If you go to the border areas, you'll yourself see what I'm talking about. So my contention is, it is high time the Indian government should reconceptualize the Northeast. It's high time. There are 8 states in the region. No 2 states are similar. And I don't really know if the Indian government understands this. You take up any 2 states, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal, Assam, Arunachal, Nagaland, Tripura, Mizoram, no 2 states are similar. So one policy cannot be applicable in all the states. This is very vital. Now, this border region of 1643 kilometers, I would divide this into 5. This is very tentative. I would divide that into 5 sectors. Now, starting from this area, you see this area, this is in Arunachal Pradesh. This is an inaccessible area. Now, about 5 years back, I was a fool. I thought that I would go to this area. I had to come back. The locals told me, you will have to be a mountaineer to go to this region. So I came back. I have now decided to enroll myself in a mountaineering course as soon as possible, so that I can go there again. The Assam Rifles, of course, Assam Rifles can go there, but not the laymen like us. Even if I have to go there, I have to start practicing walking, climbing hills for 6 months. This region, this is Vijayanagar. This is the area where the 3 countries meet. And this entire stretch, this is an inaccessible area. From the Myanmar side also, no government presence. On the Indian side, you have the Assam Rifles here, but very thin presence. Now, this is the hotspot. This borders Nagaland. This is the area that is under absolute, I won't say absolute control, it's being influenced by the Kaplang group and a CNK. This is the area I have traveled very extensively. Now, so far as the development of border areas is concerned, this region is slightly better than this region. You have a human population here, you have some villages here, you have some schools on the Indian side, you have health centers also, but without any doctors. You have some roads, you have some amount of economic development, but on the Myanmar side, which I have gone, on the Myanmar side, frankly speaking, I haven't seen any symbols of government, any government symbol. All I have seen are a few Myanmarese teachers teaching Myanmarese language to Naga's children. This is very important. Now, why this has happened, I'll not go into all these details. Number 1, Myanmarese teachers. Number 2, some army barracks far on top of the mountain. 1 or 2 barracks. Number 3, I have seen a Myanmarese flag in a Naga village. This is very important. These are the three government symbols I have seen. No Myanmarese army, nothing. Which is why he has rightly pointed out that villages are far apart. You can't really think of having border trade, or you can't really think of really ushering in a lot of development in a very short span of time. So this is the area mainly, this is the area, I'm coming to that later on, where all the militant camps are located. Now this is the Manipur sector. But Manipur sector is better developed than this area or this area. This is the least developed area, slightly better than this is this area. Now when you come to the Manipur area, you have schools, you have the villages, I'm talking about the Indian side, the villages are slightly better off than the Naga villages or in Arunachal. On the Myanmar side also, you have some big towns like Homalin. Homalin is a tourist center. Now a tourist is not allowed to go to these areas or to the Kachin areas, border areas, but tourists are allowed to go to Homalin, which is slightly located here. It's an Air Force base also, if I'm not mistaken. Homalin is there, Tamu is here. Tamu is now probably will develop into hub of border trade. So these areas on both sides of the border are relatively better compared to these areas. This is Manipur sector. Then next we have is this is the Mizoram sector. This is the socio-economic development of these areas would be somewhat akin, similar to the Manipur area. This is Champai. I have marked this area. Last month I had visited this area. Now this is the latest hotspot of arms and drugs trafficking. There are two hotspots. I'll show the areas. One is the More-Tamu sector, but it's going down. It's mainly the arms and drugs are flowing through this area. Because again the army's presence on the Myanmar side is very less. Come down, you have this Saiha. This is the Saiha district. This is the most thickly forested area along the entire stretch of the border. It's monsoon forests, thick forests, and I would pray that your government should at least try and conserve these forests. These are lovely forests, in fact. You won't find them really, I really felt very nice when I saw these forests. The area, and in this area also you have forests. But here it's difficult to reach. Almost for 8 months of the year, you find snow. It's very difficult to reach this area. So this is the stretch, roughly the Myanmar's border. Socio-economic development is by and large very poor. Infrastructure, okay, you have good roads in Mizoram, narrow roads. You have roads in Manipur, but Nagaland, okay, in some areas it's true, but in this area it's horrible. Now we can't always keep on blaming the government, that government hasn't done anything. Now this area above Vijayanagar, this is inhabited by the Lisu people, Lisu tribe. The Lisus are found in Kachin also, in Yunnan province also. Now just for 10 villages or 20 villages, the government can't really be expected to spend 500 crores to build a road. This would be very foolish. And above all, we should not see development from our perspective. I believe they should be asked what development means to them. That is very important. Now just for a few villages, you just can't really, since Myanmar is not a threat to India. Myanmar doesn't have any territorial ambitions. So just for a few villages, a government cannot be expected to build. Moreover, there is the Namdafa forest. If development, building roads and all could be a threat to the forest also. So this is the overall border area. So now, so far as border trade is concerned, these are the spots. Either the central government or the state governments have been found to be talking about these points where border trade would be developed. Right from Arunachal Pradesh to Jokathar. Now among all these points, I find only the government paying attention to More. Now 70% of all the border trade comes through More. ICP, integrated checkpost, is being installed here. Now last month, I was part of a delegation. We visited Jokathar and we crossed over to Rio also. You are allowed to go to up to 10 kilometers. I also visited the Rio lake, in fact. It's a beautiful place. But 95% is smuggle, is informal trade. So I was really surprised. I mean, how can you expect border trade to pick up so fast when nothing is there? You go to Pangchao Pass, it's a very thinly populated area. I mean, you go up across the place, your lake of no return. Then Longwa. I have got photographs of Longwa. I'll show you Longwa. Now, how can I wonder? I mean, if you really expect border trade to really pick up, I think it has to be a very slow process. First, the informal trade has to be accepted and legitimized. I believe that is my perception. I mean, I don't see any kind of infrastructure, barring More, all this Abanku, Mimi, Pangsha, I mean, there's nothing almost. On the Myanmar side also, on the Indian side also. So maybe we are cut off from the reality. There's something, this is what I've been telling. I mean, one cannot be sitting in New Delhi and framing policies for the Northeast. Frankly speaking, it has gone for a long time. One bureaucrat comes, he comes to Home Ministry or Ministry of Finance or Trade and Commerce, he's maybe from Bihar Kadar, he'd like to satisfy his boss, he's on deputation for 3 years. How the hell will he know everything about the Northeast? This is what I don't ask, these are hard realities, let us face it. He'll simply go back to his parent Kadar, he wouldn't like to dissatisfy his political bosses or his seniors. How can you sit down in Delhi and frame policies for all the 8 states? I have been reporting on the Northeast for close to 2 decades. I myself have not understood the region. This is something, these are the issues to be tackled head on. We have been avoiding these issues for a long time. This is Longwa village on the Myanmar side. You can see the condition of the village. This is the cleanest Naga village I have come across and the biggest Naga village in Upper Sagaing division. Beyond this is a village called Loji. That's also a big village. I have gone through all these areas. Now this is just across the Indian border. This is Longwa. Just 40 meters from this place is an Assam Rifles establishment. Now how can you develop, do you see those mountains? There are no roads. Road is being planned, but how can you have trade? I mean, the population is very thin. I don't know, I'm at loss to understand. I'll show you some photographs. This is also Longwa. I showed you the mountain, this is the mountain. So no roads, nothing, we trekked through all these mountains. So this is the condition. Population is extremely thin. Where is the demand? I don't really know. This is the ground reality. This is Re Jokathar, sir. So that side is Re, Myanmar. This is Jokathar. We were allowed to go up to 10 kilometers. The Re Lake is just right inside, right place. So this is a small township. So this is the ground reality again, but this is better than the Naga areas. The population is more, the socio-economic conditions are better. Then I realized what is the reason for the better, for the relative, why is the socio-economic conditions better? Then again, in smuggling. Gas cylinders, such in great demand, medicines. Now I'll not be surprised, Indian government might take another 100 years to realize this. Please don't mind, I mean, this is the fact. But the Indian government might take 100 years to realize this. People are in need of medicines. People are in need of gas cylinders. So what the hell are you doing? Now let's come to insurgency. As I have said, insurgency is on its way out. Another 15 years, nature of insurgency has changed in the Northeast. I'll not go into this is a huge topic. If you go look at the profiles of each insurgent group, you'll know the profile. Now, along the Indo-Myanmar border, I find around 13 insurgent groups active along the border. Both Myanmarese groups and Indian Northeast groups that have camps in the region. I'll show some photographs how these camps look like. The Northeast outfits are from Assam, Manipur and Nagaland. We know what happened last May and June. 2 strikes in Maung district of Nagaland and in Manipur that killed 26 soldiers from the Indian Army and paramilitary, Assam Rifles and the Territorial Army. Now this is how I would categorize the insurgent prone areas on the Myanmar side. Now, very interestingly, this is Vijayanagar, which I showed in the previous slide. Below Vijayanagar is an unofficial camp of the Kachin Independence Army. This is a fact. So you'll be knowing, I think, better than me. This is very close to an Assam Rifles camp. Let us accept it. Assam Rifles camp is somewhere very near. Kachin Independence Army cadres keep on coming regularly to Changlang town for treatment, buying medicines, food, everything. And sometimes, if they have more money, they also come to Delhi. In Delhi, there is a place called Vikashpuri. You have a huge number of Kachin refugees out there. So it's a good time for them. But if you ask the Kachin Independence Army people, they say, no, we don't have any camp there. This is an unofficial camp. But they don't create any problems, in fact. Come down. This is the Naga area where Kaplang rules. This is some kind of an area where where Kaplang's reach runs large. He is the king. This is the area where all the other insurgent outfits, 6 from Manipur, 2 from Assam, and 1 from North Bengal, KLO, which are almost defunct. KLO doesn't have any camps. All these people have their concentration of camps here at 4 places. I'll not go into all the details. One place is Taka. Taka is west of Chinwin River, Hukong Valley. This come down, this is another area where camps are located. Now this area, you have the Manipuri militant outfits having camps here, but this is not under the control of Khaplang. This area is purely Naga area, but when you come down to Lower Sagaing division, the population pattern is it's a mixture of Shans also, you find Chins, you have Myanmaris also, you have Nagas also. So here, don't mind my words, sir, we are given to understand that these camps exist in understanding with the Myanmarese army. Or maybe should I say, please don't, I use the word a section of the Myanmarese army. Khaplang doesn't control these camps. Now, here also, some camps have surfaced in the Chin state, according to my sources of information. This is also Manipuri militant outfits, mainly PLA and UNLF. As you come down towards this point where the tri-junction, where Myanmar, Bangladesh and Mizoram, they meet together at this point. Now there are reports suggesting that the Arakan army is very active here. Which could be, I don't know, I mean the Kaladan project, I mean I've been asking some people, will that be a threat to the Kaladan project? They said no. Because of the recent disturbances in Rakhine state, this Arakan army has been severely weakened. But there are reports that the Arakan army is active in this region. So this is the overall situation on the Indo-Myanmar border. Number of groups active. So most dangerous part is this part, where the recent massacres have been carried out, where the Indian army had also carried out 2 cross-border strikes. This is certain. 2 cross-border strikes were carried out, one across Tuen Sang, one across Ukhrul, but just about 2 to 3 kilometers from the border, it's confirmed. But 83 militants, 100 militants have not been killed. My information suggests only 3 militants killed. Official sources suggest 6 militants killed. This is the estimate. So this is the Grand Old Man, SS Khaplang. This is from Taka, the place from where he has his headquarters, the place where all the rebel groups have the headquarters. This is in Hukong Valley. I had gone there in 2011-12. So this is Khaplang, SS Khaplang. This is Paresh Burwa. This is the Alpha camp in Taka again. This is the PLA camp, not in northern Sagaing division, below, which is not under the control of Khaplang. This is one of the second largest underground outfit in the northeast. The biggest is the next photograph, UNLF. This is the biggest, currently the biggest underground outfit, United National Liberation Front. This camp is also not in northern Sagaing division. This is again below, across Chandel district. There's a place called Old Somdal. Now you have to walk, I haven't gone to this camp. So you have to walk for around 2 days through Old Somdal. That is all over insert. Now let's come to small arms proliferation. Small arms are available, at least in 2 places in the northeast. One is More, the other is Dimapur. If you have very good contacts, you will be able to purchase all these kinds of small arms. Also now I have been hearing that if you have contacts in Champai, Mizoram area also, because the routes are changing now. These are, the sources are, one is Yunnan, the other is some arms factories have come up in Kachin at a place called Pangwa. I don't know if I've written that name, Pangwa, P-A-N-G-W-A. This has been set up by the Kachin Independence Army. Another factory has come up in the Wa region. That has been, according to our sources of information, some Chinese engineers who were earlier working with the ordnance factory in Norinco. They have come and helped set up some arms factories in the Wa region. Now these Northeast rebels have received some consignments from these factories also, but the major source is Yunnan province. So More and Dimapur are the major hotspots. Even the Dimapur, it's heard that some militant outfits control the illicit trade. The small arms, suppose an AK-81 rifle now, it's available at 4.5 lakhs in More, or maybe 4.2 lakhs. By the time it comes to Dimapur, it shoots up by another 30,000-40,000 rupees. So these are the places through which arms pass through basically. One is Champai. The other two routes are small arms come through all these routes, but this is the most active route now, through Champai, through Mizoram. This route is also is quite active now, and I don't understand what was the logic behind fencing 10 kilometers at More. I fail to understand, in fact, why was the 10 kilometer Indian government has fenced 10 kilometers here. I really don't understand what was the logic behind fencing this sector. It's completely, this entire stretch. Again, in Fake also, there have been occasions when arms have passed through the Fake district. But this route is not very active, but still there are possibilities. These are the three places. So these are Chinese weapons basically. This was Borolan Libers and Tigers when they laid down weapons in 2003. These are all Chinese weapons. Now, rightly as official sources have told me that Indian government has taken up the issue with China. Okay, weapons are coming from your place. They are landing up in the hands of militants. But China says, where is the evidence? This is all nonsense. Now I'll show you a very interesting piece of evidence. Sorry. Do you see these two Chinese alphabets? This is very rare. In the mid 90s, when not mid 90s, around 2001, 2003, 2-3 consignments had come to the Northeast. In that consignment, there were some weapons like this AK-47, where two Chinese new alphabets were inscribed. I found this in Karbi Anglo, but nowadays you don't find any Chinese. They take care to eliminate all traces. In fact, but this weapon I had found in Karbi Anglo with UPDS. I immediately took the photograph. There are two Chinese letters, which means that it has been coming from China. Otherwise, it's very difficult to pin down China. It's difficult to confront them with evidence that, okay, arms have been coming, weapons have been coming from your place. And let me also tell you, lest I be misunderstood, this is an official policy of China as it seems. It's not that China is selling weapons only to Northeast rebels. They sell it to anybody and everybody. Okay, just finish. Drug trafficking, quickly. There are 3 trends in drug trafficking. One is consumption of raw opium. One is yaba or synthetic drugs, ATS, which we call. Another is injectable form of heroin number 4. Among all these items, it is heroin number 4 that has been causing maximum addiction in cities of the Northeast. It has been coming to Kolkata also. This is yaba. This is heroin number 4. This is an opium field I found in northern Sagaing division. Especially opium is sown around October, November. The bulb is cut around February, March. When you walk through that area, in remote areas you find all this opium, beautiful opium plants in fact. This is how opium is smoked, raw opium. This was a Naga chief in a Myanmarese village. So this is all. So any questions I'd like to answer? Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to add one thing. One of the major arms market in the whole of Southeast Asia happened to be Bangkok. The resolution of few of the lingering conflicts, be it the case of Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which was in Philippines, or for that matter the Gerakan Aceh Merdeka, which was in Aceh, the 3 decades long conflict have ended, and the major supply of arms to these 2 basic reasons have come down. So probably this is the reason that most of the arms find their way to Northeast. Thank you. I would now ask Dr. Pushpita Das to really present his paper, which is on security challenges and management of India-Myanmar border. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. At the onset, I would like to thank the NIAS for inviting me. It's indeed a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Now, today I'm going to talk about the security challenges and the management of India-Myanmar border. A lot has been said about it, and what I'm going to do is to repeat all that has been said in my own words. Now, we all know that India shares a 1,643-kilometer long border with Myanmar. Since India and Myanmar shares a very cordial and friendly relation with each other, India does not envisage any kind of conventional threat as far as Myanmar is concerned. However, security challenges in the form of non-conventional threats do persist as far as this border is concerned. Now, before discussing what are the kinds of threats and challenges along the border, it is very important to understand why this border is susceptible to these threats and challenges. And to my mind, the very nature of the border, as well as the location of the border, contributes to its vulnerability. Now, as far as the nature of the border is concerned, the India-Myanmar border has been delineated under the Indo-Burma Agreement, which the two countries signed in March 10th, 1967. And following the signing of this agreement, the entire border was demarcated, even though there were disagreements regarding the alignment of the border. And in total, we have 9 border pillars whose location is unresolved. Now, this unresolved nature of the border has created some frictions between India and Myanmar more lately, and mostly among the local population and the security forces. And one such incident was highlighted on August 22nd, 2013, when the villagers of Holenphai village in Manipur alleged that the Myanmarese army had intruded in their village and they are setting up camps. Now, this incident did not flare up into a major bilateral tension between India and Myanmar because the Indian government denied any kind of intrusion by the Myanmarese army. But the local people were not convinced and they continued to protest. Now, the second nature of the border is it is extremely porous border. Now, the porosity of the border stems from 3 main factors. First is that the border cuts across the socio-cultural landscape of the region. Second is the existence of what is known as the free movement regime. And third is the terrain of the border. Now, we all know that there are a number of tribes like the Simphos, Wanchos, Nagas, etc., who lay astride the international border. And despite the existence of this international border, they share a very strong cross-border socio-cultural and economic ties. And what this has done is that this has delayed the crystallization of the international border in this part of the region into a line which separates India and Myanmar into 2 sovereign nations. Second is the existence of what is known as the free movement regime. Now, the Indian government had recognized that the area across the border, in fact, forms a single composite socio-economic space, and the existence of the international border amidst them have been creating problems for the people who reside in these remote areas to carry out with their day-to-day activities. Now, keeping this in consideration, what the government of India has decided is to allow the tribesmen to travel across the border on either side of the border for some kilometers. Earlier, it was 40 kilometers on either side of the border, but since 2010, the government of India has reduced the distance which can be traveled on either side of the border to 16 kilometers. Now, these tribesmen have also been exempted from the passport and visa restrictions, but they are required to get permits if they desire to cross the border, and they can cross the border only through designated border points. But in reality, what we have seen is that these tribesmen do cross the border wherever they can cross it. And these tribesmen are also allowed to carry item which is equivalent to a head load. Now, this unique arrangement is known as free movement regime, and the existence of the free movement regime has been quite beneficial as far as these tribesmen were concerned because it helped them to maintain their age-old ties. But at the same time, it has been misused by the insurgents and the smugglers to cross the border at their will and also to smuggle in drugs and weapons. Now, the India-Myanmar border also traverses a diverse terrain right from hills, mountains, as well as river channels. and the entire border is heavily forested. Now, this kind of a rugged terrain does not lend itself very well to the construction of any means of communication and transportation, and as a result of which, the entire border is sparsely population and they have a very reduced level of development. Now, the absence of road or poor networks of road and transportation along the border has also adversely affected the policing of the border, because the border guarding forces finds it extremely difficult to negotiate such a rugged and forested terrain. Now, the location of the border also adds to the vulnerability of the border. We all know that the border traverses a region which is infested with insurgency, like the Nagas, earlier Mizos, Metis, Kuki insurgency, which are going on since mid-1950s. Now, these insurgent groups has been demanding a separate homeland for them by altering the external boundaries of the country. Now, because of this ongoing insurgency, it has adversely impacted the nation-building process in this region, and it has also adversely impacted the economic development of the entire Northeast. Last but not least, the proximity of the border to one of the world's largest producer of opium, that is the Golden Triangle, also adds to its vulnerability to trans-border trafficking of opium and other synthetic drugs. Now, the trafficking of these drugs has made the Northeast not only a transshipment hub, but also a destination of all the heroin and the synthetic drugs which are produced in the Golden Triangle area. Now, given this as a backdrop, what are the kinds of threats and challenges that emanate from this border? To my mind, one of the most potent threat is the cross-border movement of insurgents. Now, the June 4th incident has highlighted that the insurgents can cross the border with ease after carrying out an attack in the Indian territory, and they can hide in their bases in Myanmar. Now, these cross-border shelter and support which the Indian insurgents have been getting is one of the fundamental reasons why they have been able to sustain their movement even when they are faced with the superior might of the Indian army. Now, we know that since inception, the Indian insurgents have been setting up camps or bases in the Chin and Sagaing division of Myanmar. And these bases have been quite helpful for these insurgents, not only to rest, recoup, plan, and launch an offensive against India, but when they are chased by the Indian forces, they can very easily cross the international border and hide in these camps. Now, these camps have been also quite helpful for developing fraternal ties. Now, the Indian insurgents have been able to develop ties with the insurgents who are active in Myanmar, and these fraternal ties have been a force multiplier, because these Indian insurgents group could get training, shelter, finance, and even access to the governments which are hostile to India. And lastly, these camps have also been quite helpful for these Indian insurgent groups to come together and form a joint group to fight against the Indian state. For example, in 1990, we know that 4 Indian insurgent groups have come together and formed what was known as the Indo-Myanmar Revolutionary Front. And more recently, on 17th of April, 4 insurgent groups, the NSCN-K, the ULFA, the NDFP, and the KLO had come together to form what was known as the United Liberation Front of Western and Southeast Asia. Now, these fronts have been quite helpful in offsetting any kind of disadvantages that this Indian insurgent group faces in terms of receiving training, arms, or shelter. And at the same time, these fronts have helped these insurgent groups to operate in areas which are not their traditional area of influence. For example, the attack by the cadres of NSCN-K and KYL in Manipur on June 4th highlights this fact that the NSCN-K could strike in Manipur, which is not its traditional area of operation. Second is trafficking of narcotics and drugs. Since 1980s, the Indian Northeast have been seeing vast amount of heroin being smuggled in through the India-Myanmar border. And since 1990s, a number of synthetic drugs have also found its way through the porous India-Myanmar border into the Northeast. There has also been a reverse flow of drugs from India to Myanmar. These are mainly medicinal preparations like painkillers, muscle relaxants, cough syrups, etc. And also there are a number of precursor chemicals like ephedrine, pseudoephedrine, which are used to manufacture heroin and other synthetic drugs, which are smuggled out of India through Myanmar. As far as the trafficking routes are concerned, the major route through which the drugs are smuggled into India is through the Bhamo, Lashio, Mandalay, Monya, and Kaleva route. And from Kaleva, the route bifurcates. One goes south and enters Mizoram through Champhai, and the other one goes north and enters Manipur through Moreh. And over the years, Moreh has become one of the major trafficking route for heroin and other synthetic drugs from the Golden Triangle. Now, the trafficking of these drugs and narcotics into this region has a very devastating effect as far as the society of the northeastern state is concerned, and particularly in Myanmar, which has seen a growing incidence of drug addiction amongst its youth, and the cases of HIV/AIDS have been quite rampant in the state. Now, as far as the security angle of trafficking of drugs is concerned, it is generally argued that the Indian insurgents are not directly involved in trafficking of drugs, but what they have done is that they have generated funds indirectly through drug trafficking. It is argued, or it is believed, that the Indian insurgents have generated funds from drug trafficking by levying transit fees as well as protection fees from the drug mafias for letting the drug pass through their areas of influence. But more recently, it has been observed that smaller insurgent groups like the Khanglaipa Communist Party of Manipur has started involving themselves in direct trade of or direct trafficking of drugs because they find it extremely lucrative to generate funds for their movement. Gun running is another problem as far as India-Myanmar border is concerned. The Northeast insurgent has access to the black markets of Southeast Asia, to the Yunnan Mafia, and as well as the United State Army. And the guns which are procured from these sources are routed in the region through two main routes. First is the sea route, which is more prominent, which comes via the Andaman Sea and goes all the way to Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And all the weapons are distributed, are brought into the region through the porous India-Bangladesh border. But a substantial amount of these weapons also come overland through the India-Myanmar border. And these are smuggled in through the Naga hills of Myanmar with the help of the insurgent groups like the Chin and the Arakanese insurgent groups of Myanmar. And they are smuggled into the region in the headloads, both by the locals as well as the insurgents, because security forces seldom check the headloads. And over the years, as the previous speaker has said, Mizoram has become one of the major hub or the major route through which these weapons are smuggled in, because over the years Mizoram has become a very peaceful state, and as a result of which the vigil along the India-Myanmar border in this state has become quite relaxed. Now, lastly, India-Myanmar border is also susceptible to a number of smuggling of a number of items. Firstly, a number of consumer items are smuggled in through the India-Myanmar border, like the ready-made garments, electronic items, footwear, etc., from Myanmar into India. And again, there is a reverse flow from India to Myanmar and other Southeast Asian markets of predominantly products which of wildlife like tiger nails, rhino horns, medicinal herbs, etc. Now, the informal trade or the traditional trade which has been started between India and Myanmar has also contributed to the smuggling of items. The informal trades are carried on at grade number 2 in Namphalong market as well as in Nangpong. And most of the items which are not locally produced, but which are produced in countries like China, Thailand, Korea, etc., are traded in this market. And these items are brought into the country without paying any kind of revenue. Now, the customs officials are aware of this, but they look the other way because they argue that these consumer items have been quite helpful in meeting the requirements of the people of this region. And this has also helped in generating lots of employment. So they do not want this to be stopped. Now, given all this problem, what has been the government of India's policy towards the management of India-Myanmar border? Now, as far as the government of India is concerned, it has developed a very comprehensive strategy towards the management of India-Myanmar border, and it has got four more main elements. These are guarding the border, regulation of traffic at the border, development of the border area, and soliciting the cooperation of Myanmar in managing their common border. As far as guarding the border is concerned, India has deployed the Assam Rifle as the main guarding force along India-Myanmar border in 2006, following the principle of one border, one force. Now, today, out of 15 out of the 46 battalions are deployed along the border to guard the India-Myanmar border, and rest of the battalions are involved in counter-insurgency operation. Even these 15 battalions are not located at the border, but they operate out of company-operated bases which are located further interior from the border. Now, this pattern of deployment of Assam Rifle along the border could be that the government of India places more emphasis on the protection of population centers which are located further away from the border, and also to control the access route of infiltration. And the lack of roads along the border and inadequate manpower as far as Assam Rifle is concerned also prevented it from deploying it along the border. In addition to the deployment of Assam Rifle, Indian government has also decided to build fences along those stretches of a border which is most vulnerable to infiltration. So till 2013, 4 kilometers of fences has been built. But this has to be stopped because the local people have started protesting, because these fences were built 10 meters away from the border, and the local people have argued that the fence not only cut across their village, but in the process they are losing a large chunk of territory to Myanmar. The second element is regulation of traffic. There are 3 designated entry-exit points along India-Myanmar border. This is More in Manipur, Zokhathar in Mizoram, and Pangsu Pass in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, Pangsu Pass is exclusively for the movement of tribesmen only. Now, as far as the movement of people along the border is concerned, mostly the tribesmen who cross the borders to maintain their socio-cultural as well as economic ties with the relatives which are who are residing on the other side of the border. There are a number of Myanmari citizens who come to Manipur to avail medical and educational facilities. And with the opening of border trade, both formal and informal, a number of businessmen have started crossing the border for business purposes. As far as movement of goods are concerned, the government of India had operationalized border trade in 1995, and in 2008, overland international trade has also started from More, as a result of which there has been an increase in the number of person as well as goods which cross along the border. But there has not been any commensurate development as far as infrastructure along the border is concerned. Now, keeping this in mind, the government of India has decided to upgrade the land customs station in More into what is known as the integrated checkpost. Now, these integrated checkposts will house under a single roof all the regulatory and law enforcement officials like the customs, the immigration, the quarantine, and the state police. And it will also have state-of-the-art detection and screening facilities along with other facilities like banking, parking, warehousing, etc. But unfortunately, the implementation of this project is excruciatingly slow. Firstly, because there has been a delay in acquisition of the land. Now, once the land was acquired and construction started, Myanmar objected to the construction of this ICP, and since 2013 it was stopped because Myanmar claimed the land on which the ICP was being constructed. The third element is the development of the border areas. We all know that the border areas is economically depressed, and as a result of which the people who are residing along the border are extremely frustrated and they feel alienated. To address this problem, the government of India had initiated what is known as the Border Area Development Program way back in 1993. And it had three main objectives. First is to address the special infrastructural needs of the people who are residing in the remote areas by implemented very small infrastructural schemes like making small community center, a small school, a small bridge, etc. Second is to provide economic opportunities to the people of the border areas so that they do not indulge in any kind of illegal activities, and also to instill a sense of security in them. In addition to this, the government of India has also started border trade with the idea of border trade is that it will allow the people who reside in these remote areas to exchange the surplus products that they have for essential items. Now, India started the border trade from More in 1995. This was open particularly to operationalize the informal trade which was going on along the border. So by starting a border trade, it legalized the trade which was already being carried out at the More point. As far as opening of border trade at Zokhatar is concerned, it is part of the Mizo Accord. So India has to implement the Mizo Accord, and accordingly Zokhatar was opened as a border area. In addition to this, both the countries have decided to open more posts along the border not for border trade, but it is border huts. So there's a difference between border trade and border huts, so that the people who are residing in these remote areas get access to market, so that they can buy and sell what is essential for them. Now, unfortunately, both these schemes have not yielded the desired objectives. As far as BADP is concerned, firstly, most of the plans cannot be implemented because of corruption. Second is most of the plans which were implemented were also faulty because the people did not consult the local population as to what exactly they required. So this is one of the major areas where the government of India has failed. As far as border trade is concerned, it also did not take off the way it was envisaged. Firstly, the basket or the items which is there to be traded is extremely restricted. As of now, only 64 items can be traded under border trade. Secondly, the items which were included for border trade are of low commercial value. And thirdly, there is a restriction on the amount of trade which can be carried out in a particular season.
2 more minutes.
Okay. Finally, I'm coming to soliciting the cooperation with Myanmar. As has been already said, that India has been constructively engaging Myanmar to manage their border since 1990s. And in 1994, both the countries signed an agreement for maintaining peace and tranquility along the border. And since then, we had signed a number of agreements. And these agreements have paved the way for the establishment of bilateral institutional mechanisms in the form of a number of meetings which take place at the foreign secretary level, at the home secretary level. The meetings also takes place between the border guarding officials, between the surveyors generals, between the officials of Anti-Narcotics Bureau, etc. And these platforms have been quite helpful in sensitizing each other about the security needs. And the results have been also quite there to be seen. For example, both the countries have agreed to carry out joint as well as coordinated operations against insurgents. Both the countries have also decided to have coordinated patrol along the border, and they have also agreed to share information as far as movement of the insurgents are concerned, and drug trafficking and terrorism. And both the countries have also agreed that security of the border can only be achieved if the border area is developed. So accordingly, they have agreed to invest more on the infrastructural development of the border area, and also to open up more border huts along the border. The flip side of it is that Myanmar, what we have seen is that they have been quite half-hearted as far as launching operations against the Indian insurgents are concerned. And they also seem to be quite non-committal as far as development of infrastructure along the border is concerned. They might be having their own constraints regarding that. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the proper management of India-Myanmar border is quite important, not only for the security, but also the development of this area. And India can do so both unilaterally and with cooperation with Myanmar. First, I think India should deploy the Assam Rifle fully at the border and give it the sole responsibility of guarding the border, divesting it from the responsibility of doing counterinsurgency. Second is that it is very important that India elicit the cooperation of the border area to secure the border, and also encourage them to participate in their own development. It is also very important that India implement the infrastructural projects which it has started along the border area. As far as Myanmar is concerned, we have been constructively engaging Myanmar, and we should continue to do so by increasing the number of meetings we have with them. And India should also resolve all outstanding border disputes with Myanmar and develop infrastructure along the India-Myanmar border. And I think this will help Myanmar also to develop stake in a very peaceful and developed shared border. Thank you very much.